If you're thinking respiration is simply breathing, you are mistaken. Respiration is of two types. One is called the physiological respiration, and the second one is called the cellular respiration. The physiological respiration involves or includes the process of breathing, simply the process of inhalation of oxygen and exhalation of the carbon dioxide. Now, this process occurs in the lungs and it is an extracellular process. When we talk about cellular respiration, it involves the breakdown or oxidation of the glucose to produce energy in the form of ATP, either in presence of the oxygen or in the absence of the oxygen. And thereby we have, you might be knowing, aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Now this process occurs in the cell and it is an intracellular process. The different phases of the cellular respiration, some of them occur in the cytoplasm while the remaining occur in the mitochondria. In this particular video, we will learn about the process of respiration in plants, in animals, in humans, and we will also learn about the process of cellular respiration. Let us begin with the process of respiration in the plants. Plants, unlike animals, do not have any kind of specialized organ for the exchange of gases, as each of the parts of the plants take care of their own gas exchange needs. Now, the exchange of gases in case of plants occur mainly through the stomata and the lenticels via the process of simple diffusion. Now, plants' requirement for the gases exchange is also, the demand is also not much. In the night, there is no photosynthesis, and that's why the major activity that goes on is the removal of the CO2, that is a byproduct of the regular respiration process. While in the daytime, the CO2 that is produced during respiration gets used up in the process of photosynthesis. We have already learnt that in photosynthesis, the CO2 gets used up and it gets reduced into the glucose molecule. Hence, there is no CO2 to be released during the daytime. Instead, during the day, oxygen release is a major activity that is going on in the daytime. So this is the process of respiration in the plants. Each part take care of its own gases exchange, and there is stomata and lenticel that is involved in the process of exchange of gases via diffusion, and during the day the CO2 which is released by respiration gets used up in the process of photosynthesis, while the oxygen is going to be released, whereas in the night it is the elimination of CO2 that is the major activity that is going to go on. Now in here you can see a picture of the stomata. You can see this particular stomata is closed while this particular stomata is open. You have learnt about the process of opening and closing of the stomata when we are talking about the autotrophic mode of nutrition. In the second image you can see this, these are the lenticels. Now lenticels are typically present on the bark of the plants, and remember both of this structure, that is stomata on the leaves and the lenticels on the other parts like the bark, are going to help in the exchange of gases in the plants. Now let us understand the respiration in animals. We'll just learn about it in basics. The lower invertebrates, for example the sponges, the coelentrates, flatworms. Now here the exchange of gases, that is both the O2 and CO2, it occurs by simple diffusion process over their entire body surface, right? These are the organisms which are not very complex, simple, small, and that's why the simple diffusion occurs over the entire body. But when we talk about the higher organisms, there is the presence of specialized organ. For example, gills are there, lungs are present, and that take care of the process of respiration. Here you have to understand that the rate of respiration is different in both the terrestrial and aquatic organisms. The rate of respiration in the aquatic animals are typically faster than that of the terrestrial animals. What is the reason behind it? The amount of the dissolved oxygen. The amount of dissolved oxygen in the water is typically lesser than that of the amount of oxygen in the air. So to obtain the same amount of oxygen, the aquatic animal have to respire much faster compared to that of the terrestrial organisms or terrestrial animals. Remember, the difference is the amount of oxygen is present in the air and the water. In the water, it is present in the form of dissolved oxygen. Now with this, let us continue and now learn the process of respiration in human beings, and let us start the process by understanding the different organs involved in the process of respiration in human beings. Now we all know there is an opening called the nostrils. Two nostrils are there that opens to the outside and that connects to the nasal cavity in this particular area. Now from here the oxygen basically contacts with the structure called pharynx. Remember, the oral cavity and the nasal cavity, they are both connected, so the oxygen can enter, the air can enter both through the nasal cavity as well as the oral cavity. Now the pharynx connects with a structure called larynx, also known as the voice box. We'll talk about the structure and their function in a minute. Now in this particular picture, just understand the location of the different structures or organ associated in this particular process. Now the larynx connects with the next structure called the trachea, also known as the windpipe. Now you might be knowing that the windpipe of the trachea is supported by a ring of cartilaginous structures. Actually these are C-shaped. We will talk about it. Once it is in this area, the thorax area, this area is called the thoracic chamber. This area is called the thoracic chamber. Now in this thoracic chamber, as you can see, the trachea divides into primary bronchi, secondary bronchi inside the lungs, tertiary bronchi, and so on and so forth. We will talk about that. So here the trachea divides into the primary bronchi, left and right bronchi, and it goes into the left lung and the right lungs. Now in this particular area you can see the diaphragm. Remember, this diaphragm is a structure that is going to seal this thoracic cavity and separate out the thoracic chamber from the abdominal cavity or abdominal area. Now you can see the rib cage that is present right here. Actually in both the sides the rib cages are present and they protect this particular visceral organ, that is the lungs. Now inside the lungs you have many other structure including the important alveoli. Now let us see the structure, their description and the function of all the organs that are associated with this particular pathway or the process. The nose is the external portion that is supported by both bone and cartilage. Now internal nasal cavity divided half by midline nasal septum. Septum is a wall basically, and lined with respiratory mucosa. The mucus is released. So the function is it produces mucus, filters, warm and moistens the incoming air. See, whenever the air is coming from outside, it will contain large particles or large amount of dust particles. The temperature might be less, right? So it basically is going to be brought to the temperature that is similar to that of the internal body, and also the air is going to be moistened, so that when it actually goes into the lungs, there is the oxygen or the air is in a similar condition to that of the body. The next structure is a pharynx. Now it is a structure that connects the nasal cavity to the larynx and oral cavity to the esophagus, a common opening, and it is a passageway for the air as well as the food. The next structure is the larynx. It connects the pharynx to the trachea. The opening can be closed by epiglottis. You have learned about this epiglottis in the nutrition. Now the larynx is also called the voice box. What is the function? It acts as the air passageway and it prevents the food from entering the lower respiratory tract whenever we swallow the food. The next organ is the trachea. Trachea is also known as the windpipe. It is flexible tube that runs from the larynx and divides into two primary bronchi, that is left and right bronchi. The walls contain the C-shaped cartilages that are incomplete posteriorly. So on the posterior side, they are incomplete, C-shaped, where trachealis muscles occur. The ring of cartilage prevents the trachea from collapsing when no air is present. It's an important point. Remember that there are C-shaped cartilage and they will prevent the trachea from collapsing when there is no air present in them. What is the function? It is again a air passageway and it is going to filter, warm and moisten the incoming air so that it can be used in the lungs without much of difficulty. Now we come to the next structure, that is the division that occurs post to the primary bronchi. Now consist of left and right main bronchi which subdivides within the lungs to form the secondary, tertiary and then the bronchioles. Now the bronchiolar walls contain complete layer of smooth muscles. What is the function? The air passageway containing trachea with alveoli and it warms and moistens the incoming air. So as you can see, till now whatever you are seeing, when the air enters the nose, the air is getting filtered. We are removing the unnecessary substances, the pollutants to whatever extent possible, and also we are bringing that air to the regular body temperature, and we are also moistening the air so that the efficiency of the exchange later on in the lungs can be improved. Now the next structure let us talk about is the alveoli. Alveoli is very important for the exchange of gases, and actually in the lungs this is the structure that is going to act. This is the main site for the exchange of gases, O2 and CO2. The microscopic chambers at the end of the bronchial tree, the walls of simple squamous epithelium. The external surfaces are intimately associated with the pulmonary capillaries. Now why is this important? You learn that the pulmonary capillaries are going to help to bring the deoxygenated blood from throughout the body, and this gets oxygenated at this particular site. We will talk about it in detail in the upcoming slides. The lungs is a paired organ located within the pleural cavities of the thorax. So you have the thoracic chamber as I was saying. So inside the pleural cavity you have two of this. So you have the left lung and the right lung. It is composed primarily of alveoli and the respiratory passageways. That is, we are talking about the primary, secondary, tertiary bronchioles. So that one along with alveoli is the main composition of the lungs. The organ, the function. So it is the organ that houses the alveolar sac and help in the process of breathing. The last structure that we are going to talk about is the pleurae. It is serous membranes. It is a membrane of the lung and it produces lubricating fluid and compartmentalizes the lungs.